Hello and welcome to the show. Now, I like having an auction house in a Forza Motorsport and a Forza game. In general, there are some very interesting deals you can get on it and some interesting cars, etc. up here. However, since Horizon 3, they have tended to be a little bit controlled in terms of prices. I understand why. It stops hackers exploiting, sort of getting credits and then giving credits around with glitched out, or glitch, but with maxed out cars. It also stops bids for rare vehicles going up to huge credit limits, and the only way you could have achieved that is potentially having glitch credits in and so on and so forth. I understand why there is some controls over the prices of cars, but it does mean there's a minimum maximum value cars will go for. So perhaps the ability to find weird and wonderful bargains is a little bit diminished. That is why I set out to try and find the best bargains that I could on this game. We start our first car, a Nissan 370Z. Now, admittedly, it was 100,000 credits. And for a 370Z, that is a fair amount of money. Do not get me wrong, I like the car, but it's not traditionally worth quite that much in terms of, the cash. It's an interesting livery on this one. It's rather sparkly. The wheels are rather shiny. Now, why is this car a good deal? Well, it has a V8 in it. It has a twin-turboed V8 that puts out over 1,000 horsepower. It's also all-wheel drive, which means it is mighty fast. Certainly in a straight line. Anyway, it's only got 295s around it. It hasn't got the biggest of tyres, which is a little bit of a concern. And it can be a tad on the understeery side, to say the least. However, over the course of the lap, it's, ridiculously fast. The fastest vehicle we have had so far, this is the Yas Marina South Circuit, the one that I've used for hot lapping when I do car reviews and so on. The fastest lap we have ever seen around here was a 104.5 set by the GTA Spano. This modified Nissan did a 103.7. Yeah, it's very quick. It's very, very quick indeed. It doesn't like these... It doesn't like a lot of the longer corners. We get a fair bit of understeer through the higher speed, longer corners, but the acceleration is just so brutal in this car that, it doesn't really matter. You will get it out of a corner and then it will absolutely fly down the next straight. Of course, because it's all-wheel drive, having the small tyres doesn't really matter too much. It will have the traction to propel itself along at ludicrous speeds. Up next, sticking with absurdly powerful V8s, the 67 Chevrolet Chevelle was for just over 80,000 credits. This one, again, another 1,000 horsepower V8, not a twin-turboed one, though, this time. Gone for the supercharger, same engine that we would have had in the Nissan. I know there will be those who will be thinking, well, of course it's supercharged. It's got the supercharger blower on the bonnet. That's a bonnet custom option, not related to the engine. Essentially, I can put turbos and still have that on the car. It's a quirk of Forza, but never mind about that. Yeah, 1,000 horsepower, this time rear-wheel drive. Muscle car does have race tyres, thankfully, on this one, but even with them, it's still not exactly the great... I mean, as you would imagine, really, it's not the greatest of vehicles, not the easiest of vehicles to drive. It's kind of quite twitchy oversteery, if that makes sense. You can kind of see the way that it was sort of wanting-ish to oversteer around the final corner. Also, a little bit limited in terms of gears. It will run out of speed, or I say run out of speed, it runs out of gears at 180 miles an hour. Start buzzing the limiter. Now that's okay around here because we basically hit that limiter at the very end of that back straight, but longer circuits. You can't really make the most of the straight line speed potentially in the Chevelle. It's very noisy, very sideways, but could be a lot more difficult to drive, in all honesty, when you have this much power going through a rear-wheel drive car. It could be a lot worse. Sticking with classics, Ferrari Dino up next, a big jump in price, or big jump down in price for this one, just 50,000 credits for the Dino. I did want to try and find a Ferrari for this episode. I'll be honest, of the many classic Ferraris there are, the Dino is not particularly my favourite. Admittedly, of late, they're kind of growing on me more. I never used to be a huge fan at all of the Dino. I kind of like them a little bit more of late. But yeah, many classic Ferraris. I bidded on a few of them. California, the Daytona, and so on. They went for considerably higher amounts of money, sort of 150, 200,000. Admittedly, for those cars in real life, that would be very cheap. But in terms of Forza, yeah, I wasn't able to really get them cheap enough for me for the sake of this video. But yeah, 50,000 credits for a Dino. It is lightly modified. I believe it is just the homologation parts fitted on the car. No, it's certainly not going to be going as fast as the Chevelle, as the Nissan, and as some of the cars that are to come. However, for a classic Ferrari, 50,000 credits, not bad. Actually quite a nice car to drive. I enjoyed driving the Dino. While Monza is not exactly this car's strong suit, being only a C-Class car, it was still, yeah, a nice, pleasant vehicle to drive around a circuit. You really can't complain for 50,000 credits or with a classic Ferrari. We go back to the noisy craziness next. Ford Falcon, another 50,000 credit car, the Falcon XR GT. It's another ludicrously powerful V8. I believe it is the Shelby GT500 engine in this one, which means 995 horsepower. So, not quite as much as the Nissan, no, but still silly power figures. And to make matters worse, it didn't even have race tyres. This one was on sport tyres. It had an awful diff, which meant it spins one wheel when you go to put the power. To be fair, spinning one wheel does make it a little bit easier to keep it under control. Yeah, it's terrible diff. It's on sport tyres, sorry. So the traction isn't great. The cornering isn't amazing. It is very quick accelerating when you vaguely get it pointing in the straight line, of course. It's a mid S-Class car, this one. So yeah, there is certainly some speed. I'm also not exactly sold on the exterior. I like the look of the Falcon, just gold with hideous gold wheels. Wouldn't be my choice. Wouldn't be my choice at all. However, for 50,000 credits, again, there is a lot of car. There is a lot of car, a lot of power for that money. I mean, the engine alone, the engine swap alone would probably be getting on easily for 50,000 credits. So, yeah, it's a little bit garish, but an awful lot of car and a fantastic noise for the money. Up next, we start getting into the very interesting section, the BRABHAM BT24. 46,000 credits for a championship-winning Formula 1 car. That does indeed sound very cheap. I'll be honest, these kind of cars are not the sort of race vehicles that I tend to drive. They are very quick, they are very difficult to, I say, keep control of. They kind of don't have the braking or the turning grip to go with the absurdo acceleration. They have kind of modern-day supercar levels of acceleration, and then you get to a corner and they don't quite stop like a modern-day supercar. That being said, driving this around for this sort of hot lapping footage, if you like, I actually enjoyed it a lot more. It's most fun with these cars is when you're driving it around yourself. I know that's weird to say. Normally I want to be having wheel-to-wheel battles and so on, but with these cars, because they're so awkward to drive, some of the more fun you have actually is just, you know, taking it for a few laps around Brands Hatch. Because yeah, this was an entertaining experience. I mean, I feared for my life through most of the corners because that's just kind of what you do with this sort of vehicle. But yeah, it was quite good fun. And again, for 46,000 credits, that's an awful lot of car. That's an awful lot of performance for the money. Okay, yeah, sure, the Nissan is going to beat this in terms of a lap time. The Nissan is all-wheel drive, ridiculous levels of power, modern race tyres, modern race brakes, and so on. Yeah, the Nissan will go around a circuit faster than the BRABHAM, but the BRABHAM is a very interesting piece of motorsport history for not very much at all in terms of money, although you've got to try and keep it out of the gravel traps, because, yeah, that's an easy place to get stuck. Up next, another interesting piece of motorsport history in the form of a classic F1 car, the Porsche 804. At just 43,000 credits, even cheaper than the BRABHAM. This is a quite fascinating little machine. I'll be honest, never heard of the car until it was in a Forza car pack. It did one round in the Formula 1 Championship in 1962. The car raced, of which it won, and then wasn't seen of again. It has a flat 8 air-cooled engine in this car. Again, I can't think of another example, another car that has a flat 8 engine. It produces 188 horsepower, 113 torque, sorry. There's not a huge amount of power or torque, no, for a Formula 1 car, but it weighs less than 1,000 pounds. It is incredibly, incredibly light. I didn't know it had only 188 horsepower when I drove it around. It doesn't feel like 188 horsepower in this thing because it is so brilliantly light. It is pretty damn aerodynamic as well, so it doesn't go slow down the straights. It makes a very, I say a very obscure noise, a different noise from this car. It's just something very, very different. And again, while it's not the easiest car in the world to drive, it actually wasn't as terrifying as I was perhaps expecting a classic Formula 1 car to be. You can still get it sideways if you're a little bit of a fool with the throttle. But yeah, a very interesting piece of motorsport history. Up next, we go down to 34,000 credits with the Lotus 211. I love the Lotus 211. It is a brilliant, brilliant track car. There is millions and millions of miles of grip with this vehicle. It isn't particularly fast in a straight line because that's not the point of the car. It is designed to go round a corner as quickly as possible. I mean, for the 30,000 odd credits, no, you do not get a roof, but you do get to go round corners at absurdo speeds. Truth be told, actually, I much prefer the 211 to the newer 311. I know over the course of the lap, the 311 would be the faster car. The 311 would be the quicker vehicle. However, the 211 is more fun to drive. It is better balanced. It's not as powerful. No, I think the 311's got up to some 400 odd horsepower, but that much power kind of ruins the 311 in many ways, and it's certainly not quite balanced enough for my personal tastes to really work. I think the 211 is a nicer car to drive. I'll have a lot more fun driving it around a circuit, and for such a small amount of money, you really can't go wrong. I was bidding another car that I was trying to get for this episode, the BAC Mono. I saw a few of them come up for auction. I was trying to get one of those vaguely cheaply. None of them went for less than 100,000 credits. And this, yeah, this was, I think, one of the bargains that I was most pleased of overall. We move next to, well, another utterly crazy-looking car. Just 30,000 credits needed for this Porsche 935. I love this era of kind of silhouette race cars. They're utterly, utterly mad because restrictions were few and far between them. Often could kind of go crazy with the cars, and you've got some utterly, utterly just bizarre machines, but that were very, very quick. They were very quick indeed. This isn't my favourite looking of the Porsche race cars. I'll be honest, it's not my favourite looking of them, but it is certainly one of the more distinctive. The rear wings on these cars, I think it was something to do with the width the wings had to be at, always look out of place because it doesn't kind of fill the entire back. There's kind of a normal Porsche with a very, very super, super wide body kit stuck on top of it. But you put it all together in this car, I mean, this Porsche would do about 220 miles an hour. And it's still, again, it's not a terrifying car to drive. It is surprisingly composed, even if that's not a good point to say that when I very, very nearly lose the back end at incredibly high speeds. But I managed to gather it all back up without too trouser browninger moments. It is, yeah, a very, very fast race car. A very fast race car. Incredibly distinctive looking vehicle and surprisingly accessible in terms of drivability. All for just 30,000 credits. We get even cheaper though up next, 23,000 credits for a Jaguar F-Type. Now admittedly this is the Fast and Furious version of the Jaguar F-Type, which I don't think is any different in any way, shape or form than the standard version of the F-Type. They have the same amount of power. I think they're a slightly different year, and that's about it. You might be able to do different modifications to one or the other, but yeah, in standard guys, this is basically an F-Type for 23,000 credits. Again, that's a lot of car. That's an awful lot of car for the money. I'll be honest, I'm not the biggest fanboy of the F-Type. While, you know, you look at it, yeah, it's a nice looking car. Certainly can't complain about the F-Type. It's not something that I desperately want to own particularly. Even that being said, for just 23,000 credits, that's a lot of car. Some 550 horsepower in this of roaring Jaguar goodness. It's gonna go very, very damn fast for essentially the same sort of money as a Fiesta. I mean, don't get me wrong, Fiesta's good fun cars, certainly the Fiesta ST's good fun cars and so on, but I have a sneaking suspicion I know which one I would choose, and I also have a sneaking suspicion I know what one most people would be choosing as well. We move to, though, the final car on this list. It is also 23,000 credits, the Nissan BLUEBIRD Silhouette race vehicle. It is quite difficult to get cars, certainly for much less than 20,000. Not that many cars go on, essentially, for less money than that, and a lot of them will tend to creep up a little bit more. I think I'm the only bidder on this particular Nissan. Again, it's another ludicrous silhouette race car with a body kit far too... I mean, you can barely tell what the car is underneath all of this one, I will be honest. It's another wing as well that is a little bit too narrow. I say a little bit too narrow for the car. It doesn't quite look right compared to modern standards, but I'm fairly sure that was the way the regulations were back then for the vehicle. It makes a lot of turbo noise. There's a lot of... No, I'm not quite going to hear all that bit, typically. There's a lot of turbo noise going on with this car. There's a lot of speed going on with this, as you would expect. It's up in R-Class. Not quite as fast as the Porsche in terms of straight line speed. No, it's not going to be hitting that 220 mile an hour mark. It's not going to be going around a circuit quite as quick as the 935, but it's still going to be going pretty bloody fast and looking rather unusual while doing all of that. And even in the rain here at Suzuka, again, I was expecting it to be a terrifying car to drive. It's going to slide around a bit in the rain, being rear-wheel drive, but it really wasn't completely and utterly out of control almost around that circuit. So an interesting selection of 10 different cars here. I will add a note here at the end of this. To get these bargains, as much as some of these do look incredibly good deals, there are a couple of reasons behind it. Cars like the BLUEBIRD, cars like the Porsche, were DLC cars, and that means that when you kind of download, install the DLC pack, you'll be given one version of that car for free. So a lot of people have these free cars and perhaps they don't want and will just go and sell them on, and not everybody's going to have the DLC, so there are less people competing to buy that car. I mean, the Porsche is about 230,000 credits to begin with. The Nissan BLUEBIRD, I think, is about 120, 150,000 credits for those cars, respectively, if you choose to go and buy them, but there are a lot more of those floating around, if you like. And the similar story with the Jaguar F-Type. Again, that's Fast and Furious car, which means it was given free to everybody and not everyone has the pack. There are a couple of other vehicles in this list. The BRABHAM, for example, is a car that you can win. There's one of the showcase events you can do that you will win the BRABHAM, and again, you will be given one of those. So a fair few of those. There will be just more of those hanging around that people do sell on. So yeah, some of these cars, and the Porsche, the 804 as well as DLC car. So yeah, some of those cars being kind of freebies for a lot of people would explain why we are seeing a little bit lower price. I have to say, of this, in terms of the overall winner for the best bargain that I came across, it has to be that Lotus. It has to be that Lotus. I was amazed that I got that car for as little money as I did, because, as I said, 211 is a brilliant driving car, and just no one was really bidding on that. I just must have timed it right to get that car perfectly, because yeah, that is not a lot of money whatsoever for a very impressive vehicle, and it's not a vehicle that was a freebie and so on. Yeah, you can still get bargains on the auction house. You can still get bargains. It is a lot more difficult, and you will find that there is a lot of the same cars coming up. There isn't quite the same variety. The Forza 7 auction house is not as good as we have seen in previous games. The price control is not really the problem. It is that it's kind of flooded with a lot of the freebie cars and a fair few vehicles that are like prize cars, reward cars, for various events and so on. They can't be sold on, like the Forza-thon cars can't be sold on. I don't think the Forza editions can either. So, yeah, it's not great. I say it's not great. It's okay, the auction house. There's not quite the same choice out there. Bargains are a little bit harder to come by, but if you keep looking, you can find some really impressive deals. That, though, is going to be it from me. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.